Okay. Okay. So the Gemara on Daf Samach Daled Amid Aleph concludes with the following uh, postscript: Pshita Sholosh Maisinon. We want to limit the amount of reaping of Chil Shabbos of Ktsira, so therefore, even though he's going to end up with an extra grogeris, which is not necessary, that's what we're going to tell him. So Abosai, this sugya that we just learned on Daf Samatal and Alf is the sugya of being marbe bishiurim. Like, for example, let's say you're cooking for a chole and you put in the pot not two chickens, piece of chicken, but three chickens. He only needs two. And that's a violation of the Shabbos. Marbe bishiurim is a violation of the Shabbos. So here he's cutting down three grogros, but nevertheless, we'd rather him being marbe b'shiurim than do an extra malach. Now we're on the top of Samatalin Amid Beis. Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Shmuel Hasam. When does Rabbi Shmuel say in our Mishnah that we should only cut down three sa'in of barley for the sake of the Omer? El duchi b'mayit b'achila k'mayit k'tzira. Because if we were to jack it up to five sa'in, he would have to do a k'tzira and cut down more barley in order to achieve the five sa'in. And therefore, Rabbi Shmuel says we don't want to be marbeb with malachas. Aval hacha dechika b'mayit b'achila kamefasha k'tzira v'adei sholosh ma'asin. Here, Rabbi Shmuel would certainly agree that we'd rather reap three grogros, which are all attached to one stem, so he only does one act of k'tzira. Now we get to the Mishnah Mitzvah Sa'omer Lahavi Min HaKarov. The Gemara is going to give various explanations, but if everything is equal in an ideal situation, if the Romans are not attacking us, as we'll soon see, then you want to bring the barley from close to Yerushalayim. We'll see why. Lo biker hakar b'Yerushalayim. Let's say he didn't do what he had to do, and instead of bringing the barley for the Omer from close to Yerushalayim, he went out to who knows where. Then Mivim also Mikol Mok. Okay, now it doesn't matter. You already messed up. You didn't bring from the locale, the immediate vicinity of Yerushalayim, so bring it wherever you want. And Maisa. Now this story is going to occupy the sugya here of when the Romans sieged Yerushalayim during the period of the Chashmonaim, or maybe it was the Greeks. I mean, again, we'll go through the sugya if we have time. But anyway, so Maisa Shabbat Gagos Trifin Shtei Alechem Bikas Ein Socher. So these are two locations from which they brought the Omer and the Shtei Alechem. Gemara says my time, but why do we want to bring the barley from some area in the vicinity of Yerushalayim? One answer is Iboisem Mishum Carmel, the Iboisem Mishum De'ema Virn Ala Mitzvahs. Okay, now. Carmel means that we want the Omer to be made from Carmel means healthy fat kernels. Now what happens is if you bring the Omer from far away and the winds are blowing and so forth and so on, it won't be Carmel. The second answer is Ema Virn Ala Mitzvahs. You have the opportunity as you're passing Yerushalayim to bring the Omer from right there. Then don't lose that opportunity and go far out. Ma'aseh Shabbat. Now we get into history. Tana Rabbanon Kshetzaru Malchei Chashmonai Zalzeh. So this is a period of siege on Yerushalayim, and obviously it's going to be very difficult for them to get the barley for the Omer and so forth and so on. Now, the Brisa identifies who were our enemies. There was Hyrcanus mibachutz, and there was Aristobulus mibifnim. Right? So he points out over here that Aristobulus held Jerusalem from the inside, and Hyrcanus besieged the city with a Roman legion. So I was right when I said Rome, under Pompey, and he had enlisted in his cause. Fine. Okay. Now he gives you a whole history of who they were and where they descended from. In any event, Bechol Yom V'Yom, at the beginning, I guess the Romans were still allowing the Beis Hamikdash to be functioning. And they would make an exchange where the Jewish people would send dinarim in some sort of basket over the wall of Yerushalayim, and Mailim Lehem Tmidim, and there were Jewish people on the outside of the sieged Yerushalayim, outside of the walls, and they would somehow with a pulley system, they would send up lambs for the daily korban tamid. Hayesham Zaken Echad. Now, I don't know who this Zaken is, but he's rotten to the core. Shahaya Makir B'Chachma Yivanis. Apparently, when he was growing up, they taught him, it was a very liberal kind of family, intellectuals. They sent him to the best university, and he learned Chachma Yivanis, so he knows how to communicate in Chachma Yivanis, has a language of its own. And Laz Lahem B'Chachma Yivanis. He tells the Romans who are besieging the city in Chachma Yivanis, and he says to them the following: as long as the Jewish people are still functioning in the Beis Hamikdash and they're bringing the korban tamid daily, you'll never be able to defeat them. Now, I don't know if he was deliberate about that. It sounds like unless he was really an imbecile. Anyway, Lamachar, so what do? The besieging legions of the Romans. The next day, Shilshulahem Dinar Bekupa, when the Jews on top, inside the Makom HaMikdash, would send the bucket with the money, Helulahem Chazir, they sent up, instead of a lamb for the korban tamid, they sent up a swine. Kemen Shigil Chatzi Choma. What does a pig do when it's being schlepped up? So it takes its what do you call it, hooves, right? V'not tziparna b'choma. And now HaKadosh Baruch Hu realizes that there's a swine that's going up to his mikdash. He gets very angry, so to speak. Avyochel. Nizazeh Eretz Yisrael arba meos parsal, and the whole of Eretz Yisrael shook. The whole land of Israel shook. V'osa shah amru orur sheyigadol chaz. They made a gzera. No one should ever raise swine because the enemies will try to get us to take the swine into the Makom HaMikdash. Or shilami b'no chochma chamis. It's not a good idea to teach your son the Greek wisdom because then he'll use it against us. V'alosa shoshaninu ma'aseh sheba omer migagos trifin ishtei alechem mibigan. So that's the story in our Mishnah. What's the story here? Kimata Omer, when it came to the 16th of Nisan, I mean, the whole land of Israel was completely ravished, I don't know what word to use, desecrated by the Romans. And where are they going to get barley for the Omer? Achrazu. They somehow, I don't know how they did this, but they were able to get an announcement amongst the Jewish people that if anyone knows where I could get barley, please tell me. Asahu charsha. Right now, a cheresh here in this context means someone who's mute, he cannot speak, and he uses his hands to indicate some sort of words, combination of words, but nobody understands what he's talking about. Osiv chadiyot, he puts one hand igra on a roof, and Chadiyah, his other hand, atzrifa on a hut. They used to have huts where the for protection, the security huts, and so forth and so on. So there's a fellow by the name of Mordechai. Now keep in mind that Mordechai Yehudi was probably 2 centuries before this Maisa. So I don't think he lived to 250. I don't think. And Mordechai was in charge of giving the orders in the Beis Hamikdash, so that subsequent to Mordechai, every chosen, I'll call him a Gabbai or whatever word we'll try to figure out, was called Mordechai. They use that name. So Mordechai came up, and he knew how to decipher the hand movements of this mute. Miika Duchta, is there any place in the face of Eretz Yisrael on the map, the Shma Gagos, that the name of the place is Gagos, Tzrifin. It has a double, Tzrifin Ganos. I don't know which word is first, but either Tzrifin Gagos or Gagos Tzrifin. Bod Kuviashkahu, and they found the place. So this Mordechai was able to figure out all the motions of the mute, and they were able to bring in the barley for the Omer. Now, fast forward 7 weeks. It's time to bring the shtei lechem on Shavuos. So where are we going to get the wheat for the shtei lechem? Achrazu. So again, they made an announcement. If anybody knows, Osahu Gavra Charsha. Again, I don't know if it's the same mute or a different guy. And Osiv Yade Aene puts his hand on his eye. Chada Yada, and the second hand, Asichra, puts it on a door socket. What does he mean? Mordechai comes to decipher the message. Mika Duchta, is there some place on the face of the earth? Dishma, its name is Ein Socher Socher Ein. Bod Kuviashkach, when they found it. Hanu Shlosh there were so let's just see what time it is. All right, can we go another 5 minutes to make up for all the So there are 3 women who apparently fit into one or 2 categories. We'll see the Gemara develops it. Either they were Zavos and they had to bring birds for a carbon after the 8 days of Nikiyim. After the Ziva stops flowing, they have to count 7 days. On the 8th day, they bring the carbon. And that's called Mechusar Kapara. Zav Yoledis Mitzor. Anyway, Chada Amra, again, we're going to see the ability of a Mordechai to decipher a message that's in code. One of them said, Lizivasi. Okay, that's almost clear. She's bringing a bird for her ziva. She was a zava. She saw 3 consecutive dam ziva. Chada Omer, another one says Liamasi. Yam is a sea, an ocean. Chada Omer li onasi, for my period of time. Savur mina zivasi zava mamish. The rank and file people are working, the Gaboim working in the Mikdash thought that ziva we should take literally as she's a zava. Liamasi mamish. But the word yam, which means the sea, we should take it literally. And therefore we should assume that she was flowing. She had a ziva that flowed out of her body, and that's flowing like the water of the sea. And lo nasi la onasa. And onasa, for her time, means that she went through all of the, just one second, right? All of the Zayin Nikiyim, and now it's the 8th day, and it's time for her to bring her chatos at the end of her ziva. And therefore, the kula chada chatos for chada ola. Okay, and Zov has to bring both a chatos and an ola. So therefore, we take 2 birds, a pair of birds, and we bring them as a chatos and an ola. Amalahu Mordechai. Mordechai was a clever guy. He knew how to decipher all these hidden messages. Shema, perhaps, bizov sichna. Maybe we're not talking about a woman who has ziva, but rather she has some sort of physiological problem. And Shema biyam sichna, maybe she was out in the sea and she had a danger. The word sichna means sakana. Shema be'ena sichna. Maybe she had a danger to her eyes. Now, if this be the case, we're not dealing with a zava. And if we're not dealing with a zava, the kula olos ninhu. And barak v'yashkach. What does it mean, kula olos ninhu? That these are all karbonos nidava, which calls an olos nidava. And therefore, there are 3 separate karbonos here, and they're olos, and not chatos, because in the case of a zava, we have to bring a chatos in addition to the ola, but in the case of a nidava, the nidava was to bring an ola. Vahainu disnan. Okay, so I think we ran out of time here. So I'm going to let you guys go if you want to go. I'm going to just take another 5 minutes just to finish up to the Mishnah. So if you want to stay, Mahainu Disnan, we learned in the Mishnah at the beginning of Shkolim, Psachia, there was a man by the name of Psachia, and he was the Gabbai al Hakinim. Right, kinim are birds that are offered in the Beis Hamikdash in certain cases, and he was Memuna. He was in charge of that collection. There were 13 collections, and his spets was kinim. Then we're saying now that according to the Mishnah, we should identify this Psachia as Mordechai. Lama Nikra Shmo Psachia. So why did you call him Psachia? Sheposeach Dvarim Vidarshan V'Yodeh B'Shivim Loshan. Just like we saw that Mordechai was able to decipher these different strange words and figure out their meaning, that's Psachia. Psachia means he was able to he was able to decipher these strange words. And not only that, he knew 70 languages. Now, this is very important in Sanhedrin, for the Sanhedrin to know all these languages, so that if two witnesses come forward, they have to understand the language of the witnesses. And every time you testify, there are certain inflections. They would understand all the inflections. So the Gemara says, why is the Mishnah saying, oh, how great Psachia, who's really Mordechai, is because he knew 70 languages? Kula Sanhedrin Ami Yoshim. Everybody who sat in the Sanhedrin, every judge, knew 70 languages. A Moshiva said, we don't appoint someone to Sanhedrin, El Bali Chachma, Bali Mara, Bali Koma, Bali Zikna, Bali Kshafim. They know the witchcraft, so that if Machshefa is now being tried, they know how to try her. And Yodea Shivim Lashon, they have to know 70 languages. Shalosh Tei Sanhedrin Shomas Mitzvah. We don't want a miturgamon, right? An interpreter to go between the Edim and this, or even the defendant, if he puts forth a claim, we want to make sure precisely what he was saying. So therefore, the Sanhedrin have to know 70 languages. So what's the big deal about Mordechai? Eladavi boil lishne vidarish. What he could do is he can combine different languages and different words to make sense out of them. Mordechai bil shon. And this is why they called Mordechai by a different name called Bilshan. And Bilshan is Bayel Lishni. He would mix up languages and be able to decipher them. Okay, there's a whole discussion here about who this Bilshan was in history. But the only thing I just wanted to see one note over here just to make sure. Number 3. So again, when we're identifying Psachia as Mordechai, we're not saying he's Mordechai HaYehudi, because Mordechai was during the 70 years between the first bias and the second bias, but rather he was. They used his name as the administrator. And he quotes from Yaakov Emden, who proves from this Mishnah that the temple administrator doesn't have to be a Kohen. He doesn't have to be a Levi. He could be like Mordechai, who came from Shevet Binyamin. Right? Mordechai Ish Yemini. Okay then? So I thank you for all the different, surviving all these different interruptions and so forth and so on.